Sure.
What's your current position on what's going on in Israel, and what's your reaction when the attack happened this weekend, and how do you think the United States should respond?
Well, first of all, just a terrible tragedy. Over 1,200 Israelis have lost their lives. Of course, a lot of Americans have lost their lives as well. And I think it reinforces that as much as we can pretend that we live in a civilized world, there are still some pretty barbaric people out there that have to be dealt with justice. And I think that's what the Israelis are trying to do is both achieve justice for their citizens who lost their lives, but also ensure this sort of thing doesn't happen again. You cannot have a country that's the size of Israel, 9 million people, if 1,200 of them are dying in a terrorist attack. It's just terrible, terrible. Makes it impossible for them to really have a country, and I think we have to support them. What that will look like probably is that they'll need some additional weapon systems, things that they can't make for themselves, and I think we should be supportive of our Israeli allies in this situation. We also have to remember that we need to be careful here. What I admire about the Israelis is in response to this, they could have called for a broader regional war. They've actually been very focused on the Hamas terrorists who caused this problem and on rooting those terrorists out of their society. We should be supportive of them in that, and as they try to root out those terrorists, but also in not calling for an escalation of this conflict. An escalation in this conflict is the worst thing for Israel. It's also the worst thing for the United States of America. So my hope is that cooler heads in the Biden administration prevail, that we focus on the real task, which is to destroy this terrorist organization and not causing a broader conflict that's going to destabilize the whole region.
But to follow up on what you just said
Sure.
a minute ago, you are in favor of additional aid and weapon support to Israel as they continue this, as long as it's targeted and specific to Hamas?
I am supportive. I've been very much on the record of that, and I think the important point here is that we should be responsive to our friends. Israel is one of our most important allies. They will tell us what they need, what they can produce themselves, and what they're going to need some support with. And I think that we should be responsive when they offer those asks, and we stand by. We're I think ready to provide that support when they make the request.
But we can't do it until there's an actual Congress, a working Congress, as you know.
That's a good point.
I know Jim
Yeah.
Jordan is potentially going to be voted today, but there's uncertainty on whether or not he has the votes. What's your stance on this? Do you support him as Speaker? He's a fellow Ohio congressional delegation. Do you support him as Speaker? And, how does this make the Republican Party look that it's taken this long to elect a new Speaker?
Well, certainly support Jim for Speaker. I think that he is now the majority choice of the Republican conference. I endorsed him early on. I think he's a good guy, and most importantly, will be able to deliver some very big things for the state of Ohio if he's Speaker of the House. But look, I think it's time for the Republican House members to unite behind the guy who has the overwhelming majority of votes and to actually get this thing across the finish line. I do think Jim will ultimately prove successful, but to your point, we've got to have a Speaker of the House. We've got way too many crazy things happening across the world right now. It would be a huge mistake to leave the speakership open because the Congress can't really function without a Speaker of the House. So I hope Jim gets the nod, but most importantly, I hope that we get a Speaker of the House as soon as possible. Delaying this thing, I think, it would be a huge mistake. And to my fellow Republicans who aren't on board with Jim Jordan, look, I respect differences. We're a big tent party. Not everybody is going to agree on everything, but this is not the time for petty personal grievances. We need a Speaker of the House, and we need one soon.
You had mentioned that you're in favor of expanded aid to Israel, but you've also been on record as wanting to look into, or maybe even curtailing the aid to Ukraine. How do you reconcile those two positions?
Well, the way I reconcile it is they're two very different countries with two very different priorities, two very different needs. And look, Israel is one of our oldest allies. Ukraine is a country that I admire a lot, but it's not a treaty ally, is not a country that we've made legal obligations that we have to honor. And I think most importantly, supporting Israel as they try to root out a terrorist organization, that's in our interest. I don't think that it's in our interest to fund an indefinite conflict in Eastern Europe. We've already seen it's driving up food prices, it's driving up energy prices. The cost of everything is going up in part because we have a massive land war in Eastern Europe. So I think what's in our best interest is to try to bring that to a peaceful resolution as soon as possible. It's a much different situation than what the Israelis are dealing as they try to address a very terrible terrorist attack.
From breaking news to feel-good stories, Local 12 has it all. Tap subscribe and hit the links to find out more.